Y'all planning for this?
Welcome back, TPR Nation. This is Jamie Shalansky in an episode of Worlds to Conquer, and I have to tell you that some people out there in the financial advisory space are acting like they were raised with absolutely no work ethic whatsoever. So today we want to debunk a lot of those myths out there about Surge and creating a lifestyle practice. And it's so important for us to remember these basic concepts because your clients, when you're surging and outside of Surge, cannot suffer because you failed to deliver massive value to them as a client. Surge is a specific time-blocked period on your calendar throughout the year in which you are hyper-focused on doing nothing but meeting with clients and delivering massive value. And those Surge schedules are wrapped around when it makes the most sense for the client, not when it makes most sense for you as a financial advisor, when it makes most sense for the client to come in and meet with you. So you know at Shalansky & Associates, we love to surge mid-March to mid-April. Why? It's tax time. Clients are going to have a ton of tax questions. You're going to have to revisit why you did Roth conversions. You're going to have to answer a whole bunch of questions because this is a time of the world where there's a lot of uncertainty, especially the last couple of years. Things have been really kind of economically shaky around March and April timeframes. Clients are geared up to think about their finances. They've come out of the holidays. They have come out of that budgeting. They are geared up to start thinking about gathering all of the information regarding their finances. This is a powerful time for you as a financial advisory office to go get the information you have been begging your clients to submit to you all year long. They are in that hunting and gathering mode of financial documents, and they can get them to you just as quick as they can get them over to the CPA, but not if you don't ask. You need to ask. At Shalansky & Associates, we send out a pre-appointment checklist, and we go through and we say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, at your next review, we're going to be going over a couple of these items, and we would love for you to submit your most recent X. And that could be your most recent tax return. That could be your most recent mortgage statement. That could be an updated net worth report. Whatever we are going through with that client on that value add, we're going to go get, and it's not the value add for that quarter, by the way, because we send out 4 value adds minimally every single year. Every quarter, we send out a value add to a client. But what we ask clients for during Surge might be 4 value adds that we are going to prepare over the summer or prepare for the fall. Why do I ask for all the information when I'm going to wait months before I actually deliver something on that information? Because it makes sense for the client. The client is already going through the process of gathering information. When Surge wraps up in our office, we often joke and say, okay, great, now the real work begins, because we have to follow through on everything that we promised the client we were going to do during Surge. And so a lot of times, the way what we'll structure Surge is we will have all of our appointments for clients, allocated times that we want to meet with prospects, and then we will give ourselves a couple of buffer days post-Surge. And those buffer days are to be able to answer the client questions that came in during Surge. And we want to make sure that we're getting the work back to the client if it didn't get addressed in that client meeting. That happens. Sometimes you're going through things with a client and they ask you for updated X, Y, and Z. And you need time after that meeting and outside of Surge to get those items back over to that client. Buffer ways are a great way of doing this. But a lot of times what happens outside of Surge is that you have financial advisors that forget that they still have to be financial advisors outside of Surge. Lifestyle is not synonymous with lazy. Instead, it is synonymous with being intentional. Are you being intentional with the stewardship of your financial practice and the obligations that you made? When Micah and I were growing up, we had simple rules we had to follow. 1, we had to show up on time. And any of you old schoolers out there know, what does on time mean? You got it, 15 minutes early. Second rule, be respectful. Please and thank yous. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Be respectful to other human beings. Third rule, Say I'm sorry. Be accountable. When you screw up, and you will, no matter if you're at the top of the game or just entering the court, you're going to screw up somehow, somewhere along the way, and you cannot blame somebody else. Accountability has to start with you. So when you do screw up, how are you being accountable for your actions? When are you manning up or womaning up and saying, I'm sorry? And perhaps the most important rule overall, do what you said you were going to do. Do what you said you were going to do. When we are meeting with prospects, we are making a lot of promises about the type of financial plan that we're going to build for them, the type of service, and how we're going to develop a lifelong relationship with them. And when that happens, when we are making those promises, when we are being intentional with the words that we are using, we can't step out of Surge and just vanish, just totally disappear. Now, this doesn't mean that we are breaking our processes around Surge, but this does mean I want to set a tone. A really great way that I heard a financial advisor once use it was, hey, I want you to let you know that when it comes to money, when it comes to financial decisions, you have unlimited access to my company. As a financial planning client, you have unlimited access to our firm. Now, what did I not do? I did not say they had unlimited access to Jamie Shalansky. I did not say, here's my personal cell phone, call me night or day. I did not say I would be immediately available every single time that something came up. What I said was, I have an entire organization, not just me. It doesn't center around me, but I have an entire organization designed to take care of your needs, and you have unlimited access to us. Unlike an attorney firm, if you have a comment or a question or you want to go over a topic, we're not going to bill you by the hour. Rather, your flat financial planning fee gives you unlimited access to our team. Reach out anytime that you like. And so we set this expectation, we set this framework that we are always available to them. But here's what we're not doing. We're not providing exclusivity around the financial advisor's calendar. We're not breaking our processes, and we are not abandoning our clients in between surges. Rather, we're giving it a place to live. We're giving intentionality behind everything that we're doing. And that includes the framework of structuring how that lifetime partnership, that lifetime relationship is going to work with our firm. And guess what, Mr. and Mrs. Financial Advisor out there listening to this podcast? It's going to shock you to hear this, but most of the time, your clients don't need you. They just need something done. So they need you when they need financial advice. And that can periodically happen, and it can happen outside of surges. But most of the time, they're going to have requests that are going to go to the rest of your team. So here's how you can structure that framework. I want you to use the words I just gave you when you're meeting with prospects, when you're meeting with clients. Mr. and Mrs. Client, in this partnership that we have together, we want to be your 411. Anytime you have a question about finances, we want you to reach out to us. We want to be your 911. If you have a financial emergency, reach out to us. By paying these financial planning fees, you're securing unlimited access to our company. Now, we might not always be able to answer your questions. We might not always be the most appropriate person to answer your questions. And if we're not, we're going to tell you and we'll point you in the right direction to get something done. Because sometimes clients ask us questions that are just outside of our wheelhouse. Sometimes we got to bring in an attorney. Sometimes we got to bring in an appraiser. We got to bring in a realtor. We have to bring in a CPA, whoever those other professionals are in their client's life. And we set expectations around that. We're not omnipotent, but we want to be that pulse point. We want to be the starting place and the ending place for all of those conversations so we can help guide you into making good long-term financial decisions. So start with that. That's a great action item. Rephrase how you're going to set the framework for your clients, knowing that you're going into surge, knowing that you're structuring it maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but you're not setting the expectation that that means that you're just going to disappear when you're outside of surge. And the key to that being successful is 2 things. Key number 1, you have to do what you said you're going to do. So if you were in surge making promises to clients, guess what? You're going to have to come out of surge and follow up on those promises. That's one of the reasons that we try to be very mindful about not taking on unasked asked for additional work outside of Surge. Sometimes we're so eager to show our value that we're jumping up and volunteering to do things clients aren't even asking us to do. So we really need to take a beat, take a moment, and make sure we understand what the client's request is. Now, once we do understand what the client's request is, and we told them we were going to do it, guess what? Do what you said you're going to do. Now use those buffer days, use that time in between Surge, make sure you're following the Financial Advisor Perfect Week, and do those things. All right, key number 2. This will also unlock the door to making a beautiful post-Surge schedule for you. And this begins and ends with your communication policy. What is your communication policy with the rest of your organization? This could be assistant. This could be a league of assistants. This could be a league of other financial advisors that work in a servicing capacity. Whatever that is, what is your communication policy? So oftentimes when our team members feel like we are unavailable or inaccessible to them, that's when we start seeing the snowball of things go wrong for clients. And instead, we just want to set better expectations. And so we give it an opportunity to check in and check out. Does this mean that we are on the phone every single day with our team? No, we better not be. But we do give client questions that the team is not empowered to answer. And those are any related to financial advice, a place to live. So any questions that come in that are specifically related to financial advice, go to the financial advisor working with that particular client. Then under the Financial Advisor's Perfect Week, we've carved out times where they're going to be working on specific advice for that client and communicating back with that person. Does this mean that they are having a plethora of all these little mini meetings in between surges? No, not at all. In fact, in between our big surges, we do have mini surges sprinkled in over the summertime. This is particularly helpful and sculpted to work with prospects and to do a lot of client follow-up when we need to, or onboard new clients. And we don't want 3 to 6 months to go between those meetings. We also check in with our teams. So our team leads will have in the operations department, they're responsible for the movement of money, and our relationship managers are responsible for non-financial advice, personal relationships with the clients and prospects. So we will check in with both of those departments and just make sure any outstanding questions, I want them to know my availability, but I want to have that structured in a way that they know how they can escalate and get to me. So we talked a lot about communication policies, and this is the reason why they're so important, is outside of Surge, if my phone is blowing up from the office, then I have failed to set some type of communication policy. Now, once you set this communication policy, it's not a here it is, one and done. Rather, it's something that you have to go over and over and over again with your team, and you also have to find a way to politely push back on them when they're breaking that communication policy. And so in my communication policy, and if you're a Backstage Pass or Invictus member and you want a copy of this, just email us and I'll give you a copy of mine. You can take, add, edit, change it, make it whatever you need it to be for you. But my communication policy talks about my email with delegation rules, and then also talks about the escalation of client things. And one of the activities that I did with my entire team was we sat down and we defined what is an emergency. Now, I did not come into this meeting and tell them what I thought emergencies were. Rather, I asked them, what are client emergencies? And then I shut my mouth, believe it or not, it does happen, and I listened to their responses. I wanted to hear from their perspective when they got the most uncomfortable, when they felt the most challenged, when they felt they needed to get me on the phone because they were outside of their wheelhouse or treading in deep water and they could no longer keep their head above. And so by doing that, we were able to go through and isolate what those emergencies are. And then we could also debunk whether or not they were a real emergency. I would say half made it on as being genuine emergencies, and the other half weren't emergencies at all. But I did not tell them that they were ridiculous. They instead looked at those and said, well, actually, hold on a second. If I back into this, if I look at this, if I check these notes, I do know how to handle that. So that's not really an emergency. So the rules with this one are kind of like goal setting. You don't goal set and set somebody else's goals for them. They have to set their own goals. But you can have guided discoveries. And that's the same thing I do with my team with communication policies. And I said, okay, I'm not going to tell you what an emergency is. You're going to tell me what you think the emergency is. And if you neglect any that I think are, hey, these are actually really big things, then I'm going to go ahead and put those on the board with us as well. And then we walked through it and said, okay, is this really an emergency or can you handle this by yourself? And if for any reason, if it was something I knew for a fact that they could handle by themselves, but they in their mind still think it was an emergency and they did not want the responsibility of handling it and didn't feel secure about it, guess what? It's stays on the board as an emergency. And I, as the leader, say, okay, great. If you enter into that situation, then you call me and I will handle that. Because as the steward of the organization, as the leader, as the financial advisor, you have a responsibility to defend and protect your team. I want to push my team to grow. I want them to see their unlimited potential. I want them to live up to God's highest glory. However, I don't want them to feel abandoned, and I don't want them to feel like I am not protecting and advocating for them as well. So if they feel one of these areas is outside of something they're comfortable with, bring it over. That's why I'm at the top of the pyramid here, and I will handle that for them. And this took a long time for my office to really get on board with. And it took a long time because oftentimes I was crutching it for them. I was a total crutch. And so when we first started this surge process and got as deliberate and intentional about surging as possible, and I stepped away from being in the office every single day, I had a lot of employees blow up my phone and still say, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. And I would just answer the phone, and it would just be a quick question. And by the way, there's no such thing as a quick question. And if it is a quick question, especially if a client is asking it, then your team should be able to answer it. That is the definition of a quick question. So if our office receives a client phone call and they call the financial advisor and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client have a quick question for you, then my pushback to that team member is great. Then you're empowered to answer all quick questions. But if it's outside of your realm and they need financial planning advice, it's no longer a quick question. And now we have to follow our protocols to get them scheduled for an appointment and an appropriate callback if it's outside a surge. Quick questions, what a joke. Nobody has a quick question, because when they do ask you a quick question, there are so many other follow-up questions that you have to ask, and you don't have all the variables in front of you. So this is one of the things that I was really passionate about with our team, that if it was a quick question, they can answer it. And if they call me, it's not a quick question, and therefore I need time, intentionality to answer it. One of the worst things, and the next time you go to a conference, the very next time you go to a conference, I want you to watch the auditorium and I want you to watch the hallways when you get out of a conference and see how many financial advisors are reaching down into their khaki pants and pulling out their cell phone to call the office back because something came up, to call a client back because something came up. And they're normally always lingering right around the water fountain or the drink station, and they want everyone else in the world to see how busy they are, how important they are, that somebody from the office is calling them. And the worst thing that you could do if it's not a genuine emergency. So if it's not a genuine emergency and you're answering the call at a conference on the fly, then you are doing sloppy work. That is sloppy work as a financial advisor. Do not let your ego deceive you into thinking it is anything else. Because if it was an emergency, and think about this really, really hard, okay? If you were at a conference and your wife called you and said, my God, our 16-year-old son was just in an accident. They were on a head-on collision. They're in the ICU unit. I'm headed to the hospital now. Is that a genuine emergency? Hell yes, it is. That is an emergency. And would you stand by the beverage counter or the water fountain or the restroom and have that conversation with everyone to hear? Or would you leave all your stuff behind, immediately get in that elevator, start getting travel arrangements set up, and leave that hotel and go take care of it? When emergencies happen in our life, they are real, they are impactful, they are genuine, and they happen in our personal life and they happen in a client's life. But when a real emergency happens and you do get that phone call, you don't sit there around all of your peers having and pontificating a bigger, longer conversation because you want them to see how important you are to be brought into an emergency. No, you pick up your stuff, you leave, you handle that matter. And if a client was calling you, if your office was calling you with a genuine emergency and you're having it out in the hallway, you're being sloppy. You're not being intentional. That is when you leave that conference, you go back up to your room, you figure out a quiet space, you address the matter so it has 100% of your focus and attention. Because if you're taking phone calls at conferences and pretending that they're emergencies while you're just socially awkward and wanting everyone else to think you are super, super important, then you are missing the greatest opportunity that you have at conferences. So many times people at conferences think that the education and the value comes from attending the keynotes and the breakouts and the different sessions. And all of the top financial advisors I know say that the greatest experience about going to conferences and reason why they choose to go back, even if that venue is subpar, is because they have an opportunity to network with other financial advisors. But you can't network with other financial advisors. You can't go in and be curious and gather information and problem solve and strategize when you're on the balcony talking about nonsense because you simply want to avoid chit chat and other conversations with advisors. What if you challenge yourself to be interested instead of so desperately trying to be interesting? What if you were interested in other people's practices and other people's areas of expertise, and you picked their brains and networked and got to know them, and maybe even started a masterclass, maybe even formed some type of association or group where you guys could come together and collaborate? I don't know, something like the Perfect RIA? Instead of going to these venues and trying to showboat how important you are and how busy you are, that you don't have any time to network with other financial advisors. What a wasted opportunity. You might as well set your $3,000 to $5,000 on fire, right? Because how many times have we attended a conference and we went home and was like, I guess it was good to be there, but I didn't really get $5,000 out of this. I didn't really get $20,000 out of this venue, because we got to think about money that way. Even if the conference is $500, we need to think about all of the travel arrangements, all of the airfare, and all of the traded opportunity that we could have been prospecting, could have been servicing clients, could have been with our family, and instead chose to be there. There is a cost to attending venues. There is a realized cost, and you must be conscientious of that, and you must be diligent about networking with other financial professionals when you're in that space and you have that opportunity in front of you. So if your office is genuinely calling you with an emergency, and it's the type of emergency that warranted them interrupting you outside of Surge and getting you on the phone, then I better not see you take this call by the coffee cart, because I'm going to come over and chit chat with you when there's no reason why I can't, because you're not being intentional about whoever you're talking to. If it was your kid that got in a head-on collision and was headed to the hospital, you would pick up your stuff, you would leave, and you would give your spouse, give your whoever it was that was calling you that dedicated attention so you could go in a problem-solving mode. And you should be doing the same thing with your office. You should have the same reaction. If they call you with an emergency, then somebody needs you, and they need your full, undivided attention. But if you haven't spelled out for them what an emergency is, if you haven't asked them what that emergency is when it comes up, then guess what? Your office is going to call you every time they need to hit the easy button. Every time they need to hit the easy button, they will call you for a quick question. Oh, I hate to trouble you, but X, Y, and Z. Hey, can I bother you real quick? Hey, do you have a second? A second. Nobody wants a second. They want 10 to 15 minutes, and they want 20 to 25 minutes of uninterrupted activity as now you try to get refocused on whatever you were there to try to learn. Now, have I been at events in which my team does need to get a hold of me and they do have an emergency? Yes, of course. And do I take those calls? Absolutely. Is it by the beverage table? Maybe. I don't know if I'm thirsty or not. But when they do call me and I have an emergency, what I will normally do, jokes aside, is I will step aside to some type of secluded alcove or private area, and I will say, hey, listen, I'm at this conference, but if you have an emergency, I'm going to give you my undivided attention. What's up? And then they'll ask me whatever it is, and I will answer that and say, hey, listen, I stepped away from this activity right now so that I could take this phone call, but I feel like it could have waited until the break. I feel it could have waited till lunch. I feel it could have waited till I wrapped up. Is there any reason that I should be totally disengaged from my activity currently and on the phone with you? And this is a really great reminder to our team members that when we're outside of Surge doesn't mean we aren't doing other things. That doesn't mean that we aren't being intentional with our time just because we're not in the office and just because we're not meeting with clients. And so I respectfully push back on my team members when and if they call me with not a real emergency. And guess what? My team is so freaking awesome about this. They will say, I am so sorry. This is not an emergency. It could 100% wait, and I violated the rules of escalation. I'll get back to you later. Or they simply say, you know what, Jamie, no, I need your attention. I can't problem solve this, and I need you right now because it hits one of these emergency levels. And I'm saying, great, give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna go up to my room and let's solve this together. But if my team doesn't know what the rules are, then they didn't break any. If they didn't know what the process was, they didn't break any. Now, these processes, these policies that we talk about so vigilantly at the Perfect RIA, they have to be written down and documented. And that is one thing that I always tell my team members, especially when they start or they think that they've really messed up on something. I say, listen, there's a get out of jail free card in our office. If something goes wrong, and I'm not talking about an ethical, unlawful violation, but if something goes wrong, but you didn't break the process, you followed the process to get where we are today, that's not on you. You're not getting fired. You're not getting disciplined. You're not getting reprimanded. That is on us as the leaders because we failed to articulate and document a really good process that you knew how to follow from start to finish. Do you know how many times I hear from leaders and organizations that just go, oh, my team just doesn't get it. Nobody thinks it through. Well, no, of course not, because they're not in your brain. They're not thinking through how you would have acted and you would have done something because they're not you. So you have to take an actual moment, a step, a beat out of your day, and you have to document exactly what your expectations are. If you are not a good writer, if you're not a good process writer, if you think things are clear mentally, but they're not, go hire one. Go hire one. It's inexpensive. Go to Upwork.com, find a professional that does process writing, and then hire them to say, hey, listen, I'm going to audibly tell you what I think these steps are, and then I want you to put them into a process. And then you should have that documented for your team. Your team, before they ever called you, should have checked to see if they could find the answer on their own. Not because they Googled it, but because you had a written process of how the rules of escalation work when you want something done. This isn't somebody else's fault. This is your fault. If you know how something should be done, even if you're a team member, especially if you're a team member listening to this podcast, and you know how something should go step by step, but it's not formalized, it's not documented, and nobody else knows what the outcome is supposed to be, shame on you. Shame on you for not bringing it up. I just went through this exercise with my executive assistant, and she is phenomenal. We had a snafu that ended up happening, and a deadline was missed for a marketing event. And that deadline put her in a bind because this deadline was missed by other people that were not associated with something that she was doing. It became her emergency to now have to navigate around. And that was her social reputation on the line. She had to work with the venue. She had to work with the publishing company. She had to work with the marketing team to get these things done because other people failed to meet the deadlines that were already assigned to them. And so she just went on and on and on and was like, this is what should have happened. This is what should have happened. This is what should have happened. And I said, yeah, absolutely. But I don't know why you're telling me if this wasn't documented, now you have a responsibility. Any person, anyone can point out problems. We can walk around all day long pointing out problems and telling people what they should be doing, but we actually don't take a moment to figure out the solutions, write them down, finesse them, revisit them to make sure that they're accurate and working as we theorize that they would be in reality. So don't come to me with problems. Come to me with the solutions and the steps that you're going to take to empower everyone around you to follow this. And even when I was talking to her and I said, listen, you're sitting here pointing out problems. I don't want to hear about it. I could identify these problems and probably 12 others you weren't even thinking about when it came to this. What is the solution? And she's like, well, the solution is we should have hard deadlines. And I said, absolutely, great, fantastic. We had a hard deadline. It was missed. And her comment was, well, who's supposed to be leading it? No. You're bringing it up. Now, what are you going to personally do to empower and support and help your team to make sure these things aren't continually happening? You cannot be a part of my organization and point out everyone else's flaws without taking some direct ownership or having some accountability or being willing to coach the other person who maybe dropped that ball so that they can be at their best. You want to talk about a measurement of success? You want me to tell you why I think I employ the very best team on the entire country and why I would go to bat time and time and time again for every single person in my team and in my organization? It is because they have created that culture. They have lived that culture. Because I have team members come to me and they don't say, hey, so-and-so didn't do their job right. They come to me and say, listen, I take this as a personal fail because this person missed their deadline, because this person ended up not being able to succeed in this capacity. How can I support them in the future to make sure that they don't have this happen again? You want to talk about success? Tell me those stories. Tell me not how great you think you are. Tell me how great you are making everyone around you. And when you have a team that lives and eats and breathes that commitment, not to just leadership, but to one another, Oh my goodness, the delivery of value that your clients will feel is resonating. You walk in our office and our energy and our commitment to making sure our clients are taken care of is palpable. It will give you goosebumps. Time and time again, during surge, particularly when our clients are coming in, they will rave about our team. They will say, my goodness, I don't know how you guys do it. How do you employ the best employees? Everyone works with me, almost exhausting levels. They are never frustrated. They're never fatigued. They never give me attitude about it. They were great. I mean, this could be little things. This could be a client not understanding how to log in and download their 1099s. This is clients not knowing how to access a portal. This is a client needing to reschedule or facilitate meetings with centers of influence and playing this game and us coordinating it for them. We go above and beyond because it matters. Doing what you said you were going to do matters. And when we tell a client, when we bring them on and they go from prospect to client, and we tell them we want a lifetime partnership with them and their adult children when they come of age, we mean it. Okay, TPR Nation, you know that we're 100% about giving you actionable advice that you can take right now to change your practice. So here's what I want you to do. Step number 1, rethink, reshape how you're going to communicate to clients about your availability inside and outside of Surge. And use what I was talking about, unlimited availability to my company, unlimited availability. We want to be your 411 with financial information. We want to be your 911 when it comes to emergencies. Second action item that you can take right now and do something about is as you plot out the rest of your surge, give yourself buffer days to do what you said you're going to do. If you're not sure what this looks like and you are a Backstage Pass or Invictus member, then email us and we will get you a copy of the Perfect Financial Advisors Week that we use at Shalansky & Associates. This is what we actually have our own financial advisors go through on a weekly basis. Monday through Friday is spelled out and it's time blocked. Outside of surge, what are those expectations? What should you be doing to deliver massive value, spend more time outside of the office, and be profitable in the process? The third step that you must take is that you must develop a communication policy in your office. You must have those rules of escalation, and it's not enough for you to write it and go over it one time. You need to go over it especially if surge is new and you're just sort of finessing it and massaging it for your office, then at your post-surge meeting, and that's when you get your entire team together and you have an outline of the highs and lows of what happened during surge and the changes that you're going to make during next surge, especially when you're at a post-surge meeting, then you need to also articulate the rules of escalation and say, hey guys, I know this is redundant and we're all already familiar with it, but a couple of us had questions, so I want to go over the communication policy going into surge being concluded one more time, and then give it to them again and again and again. If you are a parent, you know that by the time that you are exhausted saying something, your kids are going to act like it's the very first time that they ever heard you say it. Same thing with employees. You have to say it and say it and say it and say it again. Say it again until you're exhausted and they have committed it to memory. Okay, TPR Nation, this is Jamie Shalansky in an episode of Worlds to Conquer. Go find people who share your values and change the world.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA, the perfect